the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. Okay, I'd like to take a minute and ask our sponsor, Sherelle Thornton, to share a little bit about her community, if she will. Go ahead, Sherelle.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for joining us tonight. So as Stephanie said, my name is Sherelle Thornton, and I'm the director of Connecticut. Artis is a premier memory care community situated on almost 3 acres in New Haven County. Our community embodies a philosophy of positive partnerships honed from over 200 years of collective professional and personal experience in senior care. We pursue a mission of memory care that upholds self-respect, dignity, and individual potential through open and ongoing communication between our care partners, our residents, and their families. Artis is designed to connect smaller scale homey living spaces with a town center to provide ample opportunities for both privacy and social engagement. So if you have yet to visit our community, I encourage you to reach out to me after the presentation, either myself or Shannon, to schedule a virtual tour. We'd love to show you around. So one of our many goals at Artis is to be an educational resource to the community. And that's why we're so excited to present our speaker tonight, Jennifer Fitzpatrick. I've heard her speak before. We've had her in Branford pre-COVID, and she was exciting and amazing. And I'm looking forward to hearing the presentation this evening. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Sherelle. We really appreciate it. And again, we always thank you for the opportunity to have Jennifer come and present. Okay, we're about to jump in, but before we do, I'd like to share just some information about our presenter. Do you want to better connect with a loved one who has dementia? If so, this virtual event was created especially for you. Our presenter tonight is the author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, and a longtime gerontology instructor at Johns Hopkins University. A popular media expert, she has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Forbes, the Huffington Post, and the Washington Post. When she's not working, she can be found taking suggestions for what to binge watch on Netflix or Amazon Prime during this crazy time. Please help me in welcoming from Kent Island, Maryland, Jennifer Fitzpatrick.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, Sherelle and Shannon, for having us tonight. I sure hope at some point soon we can all be together in person at Artis Senior Living of Brentford. But until then, we are going to make this as much as possible, as interactive as possible. I want to answer your questions. So as Stephanie said, please write in any comments or questions in the chat section. I try as hard as I can to run this virtual program as much as possible like if we were together in person. I know we're not, but we're going to try to make it feel like we are as much as we can. So as Stephanie mentioned, we're going to have a couple polls just so I can get a little bit of an idea of where you are, what's happening with you and your loved one. So let's go ahead and jump in on stop asking how her day was, connecting more meaningfully with people who have dementia. One of the most common comments that I hear from family caregivers is how tough of a time they have talking to their loved one who has dementia. It's very common, and it's very common at every stage of the disease. But one thing that we know is that as the disease progresses, it becomes more and more challenging to have a meaningful conversation. And so what this evening is all about are finding other ways to connect, that perhaps it's not asking how their day was, asking how what did they have for lunch, or how are they feeling about the weather. We want to connect in different ways besides conversation, and it becomes more and more important as the disease progresses. So the first poll Stephanie's going to pull up, I just want to get an idea for you all. Or you want to connect better with your loved one who has dementia, who either lives with you, or does that person live by themselves? Does that person live with another family member? Or maybe that person lives in Artis or a nursing home or another senior living community. So just let us know. And just so we can tailor this to what you're going through, what your experience is right now. Okay, so nearly 70% of you say that your loved one either lives in a nursing home or senior living. Some say, very small percentage of you say your loved one lives with you, and the rest say they live with another family member. Okay, so this definitely gives me some information on how to make this relevant as much as possible to you. But again, please ask questions, please ask follow-up questions, please make comments at any point. Before we get into how we want to adjust our connecting, we talked about moving away from verbal and moving away from a lot of conversation when somebody has dementia, but let's talk about the stages. I like to liken them to visiting a foreign country. And in Cruising Through Caregiving, my book, Cruising Through Caregiving, I write about the concept of the early stages of dementia being like if we here in the United States went over to Ireland. Now, right now, we can't get on a plane to Ireland. That's pretty challenging. I'm not sure if Ireland is accepting visitors right now. But under normal circumstances, let's say I told you that after this event this evening, that there was going to be a car waiting for you at your home in Connecticut, or maybe you live in New York, but a car is going to be waiting for you and it's going to take you right to the airport and you're going to go to Ireland. Now, you've had no prep. We haven't prepared you for this trip in any way, but your favorite person's going to be in the car waiting for you with bags packed. So you didn't get a chance to read up about Ireland or plan anything. But guess what? If you get over to Ireland, again, under normal circumstances, right now we're recording this program. If you're listening to it, we're recording it in June of 2020. But if you get over to Ireland under normal circumstances, when there's not a pandemic, and you're coming from the US, you're going to get there and you're going to be just fine, because Ireland, they speak English. Now, there's a lot more greenery over in Ireland. They probably drink a lot more Guinness than many of us might drink here. But you're going to be able to navigate it fine. Signs are in English and people speak English, and gesturing is going to be similar. You're not going to offend anybody by most gestures that we might use in the United States. So I liken the early stages of dementia to visiting Ireland. And so let's use Alzheimer's as our example, because Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. And if you would like to, feel free to write in the chat section what type of dementia your loved one has, whether they have Alzheimer's disease or another type. But in the early stages of dementia, and again, I liken that to visiting Ireland without prep. In the early stages, your loved one's got more struggles with word finding, forgetting names of somebody that they know really well, maybe forgetting the names for common phone or glass or desk. Now listen, we all do that tip of the tongue moment where we have a moment where we forget the name for something, or and that's not what we mean, but we mean that you're having trouble with word finding on a regular basis with lots of items. You're forgetting the name of your dog. You're forgetting the name of your sister. Often you're aware in the early stages that something's not quite right, something is wrong. Losing items and unable to retrace the steps. So I don't know if anybody out there is watching the show, This Is Us, but there's a character on This Is Us that has dementia. And one of the examples that they share is that she loses her cell phone a lot of times. And the big problem with that is that she was unable to retrace her steps. Just losing your phone, gosh, I do it. And during this quarantine, the one thing about it is, at least I know it's in the house, during most of this quarantine. But not being able to retrace, hey, was I in the bedroom? Was I in the living room? So you see, in a lot of the stages of the early stages of Alzheimer's or other types of dementia, the person's a lot like you and I. They're a lot like you and I, and so it's much like visiting Ireland. Conversations with your loved one, you're probably going to be able to talk about the pandemic if your loved one has the early stages, and most of the time, they're going to understand, and they're going to have comments, and they're going to have opinions, or if something's going on politically, they're going to have thoughts and opinions, but they're going to have moments where they might forget what year it is. So you might be able to have a good amount of conversations in the early stages. And so again, early stages of dementia is much like visiting Ireland without any prep. If you haven't done any research, if you haven't learned a lot about dementia, you're going to be able to navigate it okay in the early stages. I liken the mid stages of dementia, and we're going to use Alzheimer's as an example, of visiting Italy under normal circumstances, of course, not during the pandemic. But if I put you on a plane this evening under normal circumstances 6 months ago, and you didn't do any prep to go to Italy, you would find yourself probably still okay. But even if you didn't do any prep, you'd be not as comfortable as you'd be in Ireland if you didn't do any prep, but you'd still be sort of okay. A lot of times, most of us, if you, in high school, we took a Romance language. So maybe you took Spanish, maybe you took French. And so you're going to maybe pick up some of the words if you didn't study your Rick Steves book or download an app for English to Italian. Especially if you're in more of the rural areas of Italy, where a lot of people really don't speak that much English. The gesturing. So I know when I was in Italy and I wanted to get the bill for something at a restaurant, you do that little scribble sign and the server knows what you're talking about. Or if you go like this and you put your hand to your mouth and like you're drinking, the server might know that you would like a refill for a beverage. And so gesturing is going to be similar, but in those rural areas, it's going to be a challenge. Getting around is a challenge. And if you need directions, so having a conversation with somebody in Italy, if they're in the rural areas, I actually happened to stay in a rural area when I was in Italy at one point, and we ran into a lot of people that knew no English, maybe this much. They knew about as much English as we knew Italian, and so it was challenging. And if you're in a rural area of Italy, I liken that to the mid stages. So you're going to be okay with gesturing. You're going to pick up words and signs. The food's going to look familiar, but you are going to have challenges with conversation. If you are, let's say you're dating someone, maybe you meet somebody, you have a romance, you're there for the summer and you meet somebody and you're trying to get to know somebody that you're dating in Italy and they speak Italian and you speak English, it's probably going to be very difficult. So I liken this to the mid stage. So Alzheimer's disease in the mid stage, we see more hallucinations, more delusions. And so the person believes that you're stealing from them, and they believe you're cheating on them. They believe that you're hiding something from them. You might have said to your mom, I can't visit you at the senior living community because of the pandemic, and they're suspicious that that's not true. They have a harder time understanding us. The more that the disease progresses, they have a harder time understanding us. We have a harder time understanding them. They physically have more challenges picking up a cup to drink water. They have more challenges with brushing their hair and wandering. We see more and more wandering in the mid stages. So think about all of that. If you're trying to have a conversation with your loved one in the mid stages of a dementia diagnosis like Alzheimer's, you're going to be challenged because there's going to be moments where they're just like you and I, and they can have a conversation, but more often there's going to be moments that they're not like us, that they see somebody that's not there. Maybe they see a burglar in their apartment. Maybe they believe that you've stolen for them. Maybe they believe you're their sister, but you're actually their daughter. And so you might want to, maybe it's your mom that you've always had this beautiful relationship with. You always asked her for advice, and you want to tell her, that you're having a hard time with one of your children, that they're having a hard time being homeschooled right now, and you really wish you could seek your mom's advice. It's going to be really hard right now. And that's one of the big challenges that a lot of people are having right now, that if they're caregiving and on top of all the other stressors with the pandemic, they're not able to have those conversations that they want with their loved ones. So as the disease progresses, And if we look at Alzheimer's, on average, the person lives with the condition 9 or 10 years, sometimes less, sometimes more. But as time goes by, slowly but surely, your loved one is going to be less likely to be able to participate in a conversation, and they're going to be less likely to understand. And if they do participate in a conversation, it's likely that they're not going to be able to follow the train of thought. Okay, so as during this, maybe in the early stages, you say to your mom, you go to visit your mom, maybe your mom lives with your sister, and say to your mom, oh, what did you have for dinner? And she's able to tell you all about it tonight, and then tomorrow night, she can't remember what she had for dinner. In the mid stages, you might ask mom, what did you have for dinner? And she might say, deck. You know, she says deck because maybe your sister served dinner on the deck. She's trying to participate in the conversation, but not in a way that makes sense to you. Again, if you have any comments or questions at all as we go through our program, please feel free to write in. We want this to be as helpful to you as possible during this very challenging time. So let's talk about the third stage. And I consider, and I write about this in Cruising Through Caregiving, if you'd like a free chapter of Cruising Through Caregiving and the worksheets that accompany it, please go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com and you can download it completely for free, plus all of the worksheets. But in Cruising Through Caregiving, I write about that the late stages are much like visiting Yemen. This is the flag for Yemen. Now, if I put you on an airplane to Yemen, things would be very, very different. If you didn't prep, if you didn't plan, sending you to Ireland, you'd be able to navigate pretty well. Italy, it'd be more challenging if you didn't prep and you don't speak the language, but you'd be all right. If you go to Yemen without prep, you have a lot of challenges. It is going to be really tough because they speak Arabic. The signs and the lettering look very different than how we write in English. Women are treated very differently. The dress code is very different. And if you go to Yemen without knowing the customs or what type of body language is acceptable or eye contact, you can wind up in a lot of trouble. And so if you go to Yemen with no prep, you are not going to be able to communicate and you're going to have a very hard time making it through that trip. And I liken that to the late stages of dementia because when people have Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia, what we find is that they are very, very hard to connect with, to talk to. It is like they're on another country and we're on another country. If they have any ability to speak at all, it may be a few words. They have very little vocabulary. Their vocabulary may almost be gone. They're not able to do any activities of daily living like lifting a cup or lifting a fork, and they start to really struggle with swallowing. Their dependence on others is increased tremendously. So this stage, it's going to be very hard, very hard. So if you say, oh, your mom lives with your sister and you say, Mom, what'd you have for dinner? She might make a noise or she might throw something at you. And so when somebody's going through dementia and any dementia, their ability to participate in a conversation becomes really tough. Now, what do we want? Many of us are very verbal. We want to talk. We want to connect. We want to ask questions. We want them to ask questions. In our society, that is what's expected. You see somebody, you talk to them. How are you? What are you up to? Oh, you talk about the weather maybe. If you don't know them very well, you might talk a little bit about what's in the news. You might talk to them about how your kids are doing. What are they up to? And this is really tough to do. And again, I know most of you actually on this program today say that your loved one is in a senior living community. And in particular, this is where we see families go in and want to talk and ask questions. What kind of activities did you do today? Did you take your medicine? Oh, what flavor ice cream did they serve last night? And it really reminds me so much of when we do this to kids. When we ask, say, a middle school age child, what'd you learn in school today? What did you do for lunch? What do you feel like having for dinner? And they kind of grunt at you. And again, the person who has dementia is a grown-up. We know that they're an adult, but their ability to realize, first of all, their ability to realize the social mores and the norms that, how are you? What are you up to? How's your family? When they're not going to respond the usual way. First of all, their impulse control is starting to go by the wayside. And so if they don't feel like talking, they might just walk away from you. When we expect people to be socially appropriate for many dementias, and especially frontotemporal dementia in the early stages, people, that kind of wipes out that need to be socially appropriate. And also there's the not understanding that the words are getting jumbled. They might not understand your question. They might understand your question, but they don't have the language anymore to give you a good response. And so what we see is there's frustration on both ends. There's frustration on your end and frustration on their end. And again, if you feel like writing in any comments, any questions, any thoughts, if you have a specific question about your loved one that you want to share, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to hear from you. So what I'd like to ask now, and Stephanie's going to run a poll for us, is early, middle, or late, where would you put your loved one? What stages would you say that your loved one is in right now? So give Stephanie another moment to tally up. Okay, so nobody's in late stage. Okay, so we've got early stages and we've got late stages. So most people, again, your loved one is in the mid stages, and we've got some of you with the early stages. Thank you for letting us know. That really helps. So again, feel free to write in any questions, any thoughts about what we're talking about, but we're gonna try to spend as much time. We're not gonna spend any time really on the late stage issues. We're gonna talk about more the early and mid, since we don't have anybody with late stage. We're gonna do one more poll. What words would you use to describe your time with the person who has dementia? So for those of you who visit your loved one, which is most of you, what words, or if you're visiting, maybe you're doing video chats right now with what's going on, maybe you're doing phone calls, but when you spend time with that person, and then I know that there are some people that you have, your loved one does live with you, I want you to pick every word that applies in this poll. So give Stephanie another moment to tally up the results. Great. Oh, wow. 75% are saying that their time with their loved one is enjoyable. That was the highest one. Really wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. 50% of you are saying fun, 25% say relaxing, 13% say stimulating, 50% say stressful and exhausting, 63% of you say frustrating, 63% of you say sad. Okay. But I'm really glad to see 75% of you say sometimes you are having an enjoyable time. And I'm wondering what that's all about. So if whoever writes in first, we're going to give you a free, you can choose. If you, first person that writes in about about having a enjoyable time, we'll give you a free either hard copy of Cruising Through Caregiving, or we will give you a Kindle version. You can select. So what I would like to, if somebody could write in about the joyful or the enjoyable moment. The first person that writes in will give you either a Kindle version copy of Cruising Through Caregiving, or we'll give you a hard copy. In the meantime, Martha says, if we can't touch and see loved ones because of quarantine and staff are super busy and can't do activities with residents, how can we best communicate and relate with them? We don't know what to ask and talk about: meals, activities that won't frustrate them. Okay. Marcy, you're going to get the free copy of the book, and you can pick. Just let us know if you give us your email address or your mailing address. If you want it to be hard copy, give us your mailing address. If you want it to be a Kindle version, give us your email. So thank you for writing in. And Marcy says, emotional intelligence is still good, and the person laughs like she always has. And thank you, Carol wrote in about humor. But I want to address, thank you both, because even though it's really tough, and so many of you wrote in that it can be frustrating, exhausting, and sad, there can be really good moments, and that's what I want everybody to be looking for. So with Martha, if you can't touch and see, I get it. It's tough, and you don't know what to ask them and to talk about. So we're gonna get to that, Martha. What I would say is, I think that a lot of times with working, when you have a loved one who has dementia, and this is an unbelievably difficult time, given the fact that you can't touch, because touch is huge. Hugging and holding hands and walking together. I think what I would say is, instead of questions, if you're calling on the phone, or if your loved one does well with video chat, which a lot of people with dementia do not, but if your loved one does, I would use declarative sentences. I think that's one of the best ways to communicate and to have a more meaningful connection. Don't ask questions. Talk about memories. Talk about what's going on in your life, and see how they respond. But a lot of times, what is really, really powerful is to talk about memories in the past. Your wedding day, talking about parties, talking about people that they love, maybe that passed away, that are in their long-term memory, bringing up old memories and old stories. Now, I know this is not the same thing at all, but during this quarantine time, I know for myself, I don't know how many of you have done this, but I've been on a lot of Zoom meetings with friends and family, and coffees and happy hours. And what winds up happening on a lot of these events with lots of friends and families is everybody starts telling old stories, because right now the news is so sad and stressful and scary. And I think that if we're not focusing on the negative, people are telling old stories and laughing about old stories, old memories. And I believe that can really be something that gets into your loved one's brain when they hear that you're talking about something that they might remember. Now, they might not always be able to say that they remember or say that they're enjoying it, and it's a trial and error, especially you can't see their facial expression. But I think declarative sentences are typically going to be better. My wife and I live in the moment, and so somebody else wrote in, and by doing so is teaching me while I watch her to live in the moment more and more. That's really beautiful. And I bet that's why you wrote enjoyable. That's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about some other ways that we can connect more meaningfully. So for one, I want to encourage everybody to stop talking so much. Stop talking so much. So again, I know that we as human beings typically like to talk. We like to share our feelings and comments. Not everybody, there's a lot of people that don't really enjoy talking, but talking less is often going to be better with somebody with dementia. And what do I mean by that? I mean be more dude-like. In Cruising Through Caregiving, I talk about the concept that whatever gender you are, whether you're a male or a female, or you identify, however you identify, I think that we all need to be a little bit more dude-like. So let me tell you what I mean by that. My husband and his friend Bill wound up going out one night for drinks, and Bill had recently broken up with his girlfriend. And they went to watch a football game or basketball game. I honestly can't remember what it was. But when Sean came home, I said, "How's Bill doing?" And he says, "What do you mean?" And I says, "Well, you know, with the breakup and everything, how's he feeling? What happened? Is he doing all right?" And he's like, "I have no idea. We didn't talk about the breakup at all." And I said, how's that possible? And, you know, after I'm going to be married 20 years, I still ask these questions, like, because to me, again, I'm not saying that every man is like that, but if two females were together, it's more likely that it would be, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What happened? I know that if I went out with a girlfriend that went through a breakup, we would have dissected all the feelings and thoughts and what happened. And again, I'm not saying that every man behaves like Sean or that every woman would behave like me, but I think a lot of men do. And so when two dudes hang out, a lot of times you see they can go play golf. They can go watch a movie. They can have a beer and watch a game. They don't necessarily need to converse. They can go to a concert where they can, you know, listen to music together, play video games. They're not talking. And again, I'm not saying that everybody's like this, but what I saw with Bill and my husband, I believe is what a lot of us need to practice with our loved one who has dementia. Because more and more, no matter which gender your loved one is or which gender you are, you both, you're going to probably do better as the disease progresses with less conversation and more just activity, spending time together and connecting in other ways. Now, I know that that is challenging right now, but we're going to try to figure out some ways that you can do that. So using your senses. So I know some of you are socially distanced from your loved one. I get that. But for when you're not, dancing, music, baking together. So I know there's a lot of you on here that you're probably not seeing your loved one right now. But for those of you who are, this is a picture of my dad and my grandmom dancing at a party that I had, and music and listening to music and enjoying touch when you're able to safely do that. And so I understand that right now that's a challenge, but doing somebody's nails or rubbing their back, and again, I understand right now, but think about this for when you are able to, when we get to a new normal. For those of you who don't see your loved one, you're not able to see your loved one, I want you to be thinking about what might you do differently when you get to see them. Instead of asking how their day was, asking what did they have for lunch, asking, you know, what they think about what's going on the news. Using your senses, listening to music that they like together, dancing, even if he or she can't get up and dance. You know, when you put music on that connects with that person, oftentimes they are able to tap their feet, they're clapping their hands, they're, you know, nodding their head. And there was a documentary a couple of years ago called Alive Inside, where there was a staff person at a senior living community. And I don't know if you can still get it on Netflix. Stephanie, if you're, I know Stephanie knows all about it, our moderator, Ed, she could look up if you know where we can find that right now. That would be great. If you don't, that's okay too. But if you could write it in the chat section, if you can find it. But there is such power in music. And again, I know that right now this is tough because that's a hard thing to do over the phone or on video chat. But when you do see your loved one, try to connect in those ways. Get comfortable with the quiet. Now, I know a lot of people right now, they're able to do sort of a social distance visit with, if maybe your loved one lives with your sibling or lives with, lives with somebody else. If you're able to do a walk together and be distancing, and maybe you walk along the water, maybe you walk somewhere where it's peaceful in a park, maybe you sit outside together at a safe distance and following your local guidelines. But it's really important to start getting comfortable with the quiet. And I'm sure most of you have had the experience, and if you're somebody that enjoys talking and you like to talk, it can be really hard to get comfortable. And there's probably not that many people in life that you are completely comfortable just sitting with and being quiet. But try to practice it when you are with your loved one. Try to get comfortable with the quiet. And if your loved one is one that is comfortable with the video chat, even if you're just looking at each other's faces, maybe you put some soft music on in the background and you just sit waving at each other. Maybe she's knitting and you're working on a puzzle. I'm not saying, believe me, this is far from ideal, but I think it's really important to try to get comfortable with the quiet. And again, if this isn't something that your loved one is doing right now, if a lot of people with dementia are not good with video chat for a variety of reasons, but if your loved one is one that is, it might be something that you can do in that way as well. So what do you do instead of talk? Can you garden together? Can you be around pets? If your loved one doesn't, maybe you don't have a pet, but you have a neighbor that has a pet. Again, I know that some of this can be a challenge right now with social distancing, but the Artist Senior Living community in downtown Chicago did something really, really cool. They actually have they put a sign in their window, and actually the media picked up on this. They actually have local residents who are walking their dogs down the street, stop by a window, and they're welcome to stay. So there's visits, there's window visits with the pets, and the residents can see the pets, and the residents have really responded to this. So again, I'm not saying that that's perfect. It's not the same as petting a dog or petting a cat or riding a horse. It's not the same, but it is in a way. And this might be something also, if your loved one is good with video chat, that you can do. In my neighborhood recently, I observed a family come to visit the grandparents, and they stayed at a distance. They stayed the 6 feet apart, and they brought their dog, which the grandmother absolutely loved. So it might be something like that. So whether it's window visits or distancing visits, social distancing visits, again, none of this is perfect right now. This is a far from perfect situation, but we are going to get through it. We are going to get to a new normal. Listening to the radio. So not just music though, not just music, but maybe your loved one, especially back in the day, like maybe you have Sirius XM and you can listen on the ESPN channel to old baseball games. This is the way a lot of our older loved ones listened, that talk radio or baseball or sports on the radio. And I know for a long time, my husband's been a fan of watching old games on ESPN, and I never could understand it because, you already know what the outcome was. But right now, especially if your loved one is in their long-term memory and it's a game that they really loved, maybe put that on in the background on a radio app. Old movies, listening to old movies, watching old movies together. And sometimes you will get some conversation out of it. So with all of this, sometimes you'll get some conversation, and you might be, if you are gardening together, and that is potentially something that can be done at a safe distance from one another. You have to do what's right for you and your family. You want to follow the guidelines by your local officials, but there's some things that can be done even if you don't live with that person. But when you're gardening, it might be, what a beautiful color that this peony is. instead of, talking about, that your child just got on the honor roll, that sometimes when it's something that there's a visual aid that can help that person with that conversation. A lot of people get very offended. Oh, my mom doesn't care. I bring up my son's doing great in school, or we're having a great grandchild and my mom doesn't seem to understand this. And it's not personal. I know a lot of people feel it's so personal. They take it super personally, but it's just not. So, but consider that there are other activities that can be done besides conversation. Aromatherapy. So the other item that I wanted to mention is that I do a lot of presentations and programs with staff that work with your loved ones. So if your loved one is in a senior living community or a nursing home, and so often they feel that the resident's actually doing okay. The residents, especially if the person has dementia, the resident's actually fine. The family is so guilt-ridden, so stressed out, they feel so bad, and they're projecting, oh, I think my mom's depressed, I just talked to her. And the staff are saying, she's really not depressed. She's engaged. We're able to, she's doing the activities that we're able to do with her. But what I would say is maybe send flowers, send a plant. Maybe you can't garden with mom right now, but that's a way that you can connect with her if you know that she likes flowers. Or aromatherapy, maybe that's a way that she loves the scent of roses. Obviously, we talked about massage, and that's a tough one right now unless you live with that person, but this can be so therapeutic. Just rubbing her hand, rubbing her back. Reading out loud is another great activity, but again, make sure that it's a book, a magazine, a news article, something that she would find interesting. It can just be soothing to hear your voice and not that she has to respond. It's a lot of pressure for the person who has dementia when they feel our energy is so contagious to the person who has dementia. And if we are tense and we are frustrated that they're not answering us, it can be really tough. So just simply reading, maybe you're reading a story. If you've ever seen the movie The Notebook, the James Garner character reads to his wife and just reads a story. It's actually a story of their love and how they met and how they got together. But it's and she has dementia, and probably many of you or most of you have seen it, but it's very soothing to her. And this might be something that you could do over the telephone or video chat. Bring a baby. So if you're doing window visits, if you're doing video chats, if there's a baby that you are socially distancing with, or the other suggestion would be maybe there's not a baby in your house, but there's a neighbor that just had a baby, and maybe the baby's 3 months old, 6 months old, and they're willing to do a window visit with your mom at her senior living community. This is the time right now where so many of us feel helpless. And if you ask somebody in your friend and family and neighbor and faith community network to do something like that they can actually do, a lot of people are going to try. And in Cruising Through Caregiving, I have a worksheet called the MET exercise. And the MET exercise, again, if you go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, you can download that completely for free. And it's a way to find friends, neighbors, family, faith community folks that can be part of what I call your caregiving crew. And again, maybe you have a great granddaughter that's in a different city, and maybe your loved one is somebody that does well with video chats. Can she call in with her baby? And so they can enjoy seeing the baby, or can she send videos of the baby? Now is the time more than ever that people want to feel useful. They want to help. A lot of us are furloughed or laid off, and we're looking for a way to contribute and be productive and help others. So if you have anybody that you feel maybe somebody wants to help, somebody in your family and friend network wants to do something, but they don't know what to do. For example, I have a friend whose mom is in a senior living community, and my husband and I actually, because she can't leave either, and it's making her a little bit stressed, as everybody's getting stressed. But my husband and I call every couple of weeks, and we even have sent desserts. They're allowed to accept packages. And so we're kind of part of that caregiving crew of sort of, it's a nice for her to talk to other people and get gifts from other people. And it makes her, just having connections with others, it takes a little bit of the pressure off of the primary caregiver. And so think about people in your life that would like to contribute in that way. I bet you that there are people that you haven't thought of. So please do that MET exercise, and you can download that at cruisingthroughcaregiving.com. Taking a walk. Again, many of us can social distance by still taking a walk. Stretching and exercise. Again, this is a time where using Amazon Prime, using YouTube, and again, I know some people aren't great if they have dementia. Some people aren't great with videos. Some people aren't great with television. Some people aren't great with that sort of thing. But if your loved one is, this is something that maybe you can do together rather than having a conversation. Observe. So when I say observe, right now, I bet that there's many of you have noticed the animals out there are pretty aggressive. The squirrels in my neighborhood, the birds in my neighborhood. I mean, actually, I boat and I live, near a marina, and the turtles are really aggressive this season. And I think it's because all of us have been hibernating, and they have taken back the land and the sea. But just observing, okay, there's beautiful turtles outside, the birds are flying, just going outside or observing something unique that's happening. Reminiscing always. Often you're going to do better. Right now, in your loved one's mind, a lot of times, if they're in mid stages, they are wandering, they are having hallucinations. And so much of what is going to make that person feel better and more connected is talking about a positive memory in the past. And one way to do that, if you're looking for ways to connect with your loved one, again, I know this isn't the same as an in-person visit, but maybe you're going through old photo albums, send some pictures to your loved one, old photographs that are going to jog their long-term memory. Send them a letter, send them a note, send them a small gift. And again, your loved one is probably doing better than you think that they are. And in fact, this might be a time where if your loved one is in senior living and you're not able to get to them, or a nursing home, it might be a time to evaluate. I mean, there's a lot of family caregivers that visit every day for 7, 10, 12 hours. It might be that when we get back to this new normal that you rethink that maybe it would be better if you're there 3 days a week rather than 7 days a week. So it's time. I think this is sort of a refresh time. I know it's a scary, stressful time, but what might you do differently as a family caregiver after we get to that new normal? So whatever is working for you now. So some of you, especially for those of you who said your loved one is in the early stages of dementia, you might still be able to have meaningful conversations, and it's great and everything's fine. And you might say, I don't understand all this, but it very well may come to the point where your loved one's not going to be able to engage the way they are now. So just realize that whatever you're doing right now, if it's working, if you're feeling connection, then keep it up. But when it stops working or you're not feeling that connection, then it's time to think about, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to course correct? And maybe video chat, I think a lot of family caregivers they really want to do video chat because they want their mom to see them. They want their husband to see them. I didn't forget about you. But for some people, it just doesn't work. And the good old-fashioned telephone is in that person's long-term memory, and it's much more impactful than a video chat would be. But think about that sometimes some of the stressors that we have, if we feel guilty or we worry that our loved one is struggling without us, do things that make you feel better. I had a conversation with a caregiver recently, and she was calling her mom 3 times a day. And her mom, we talked it out, and her mom really didn't need to hear her 3 times a day. Her mom really was okay with once a day. And examine what you need to do to make yourself feel good during this time, but also your loved one. And when we get over to this new normal, just remember, we don't want to rely on conversation. We want to be a little bit more dude-like 2 guys hanging out, playing golf, watching a football game. And again, I know not every guy is like that. Not every lady would want to dissect every detail, but that's often what a family, a loved one, and a person with dementia, they're going to be best just spending time together. And I know it's a challenge right now, but we are going to get through this, and we're going to get to a new normal where you're going to be able to do more of this. But right now, what can you send your loved one? What letters and notes and cards can cheer them up if you're not right with them? Can you do a socially distanced visit? Can you do a window visit? Can you ask friends and neighbors with pets or babies to do a window visit, or to send videos or photographs? Look into what's in that person's long-term memory of positive memories and reminisce. And we will get to the other side of this. This is a tough time, I know, for a lot of you that are separated from your loved ones, I know. But it's also a tough time. I know some of you said your loved one lives with you, and that's tough too, because you're probably, it's tough to decide, should I move my loved one now? Is this the right time? Or should I bring home care into the home? But it's very important to just always be thinking about what might I do better. And the team it better for not just for your loved one, but for you to make both of your quality of life as good as it can be. And the team at Artist Senior Living is always here to help you with all of that, and with wonderful, wonderful resources. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is the 800 number at the Alzheimer's Association is open 24 hours a day. Don't forget about them, 800-272-3900. And take good care of yourselves. Feel free to write in any comments and questions for our last few minutes. But for the moment, I'm going to turn it back over to our team at Artist Senior Living, who sponsored this program tonight.
I'm coming back on. There I am. So I just want to thank you, Jen, for this wonderful presentation. It was amazing and so informative. So thank you again for being here for our community. And I want to thank everyone who joined in this evening, and just let you know that if, again, as I said earlier, if you haven't toured our community, we'd love to give you a virtual tour. But we also pride ourselves on being an educational resource. So if you have any questions related to memory care or your loved one, or just in general resources with regards to cognitive impairments, please reach out to myself or Shannon. Our number at the community is 203-533-7287. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Sherelle. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're really grateful for Artist Senior Living of Brantford for sponsoring this evening's program. We want to thank you all for tuning in for the presentation. I have put in the chat box a quick survey. If you wouldn't mind just taking a few minutes to complete that for us. It really is super short, super quick. We appreciate the feedback. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Thanks again to Artist Senior Living of Brantford, and everybody have a safe and peaceful evening, and take care of yourselves.